glad my babies are here. This is my baby, Sparrow, Isaiah, Malia. Um, you know, one of the things that has always mattered to me was that I'm Cherokee. Um, my dad would talk to me. There was another man who was a good influence, and he's passed many years now. His name was Richard Crow. Everybody here knew him as Geet Crow. Geet took me when I was around 9 years old. Me, my brother, a first cousin, and a friend. And he asked our parents if he could teach us and instruct us in the dances. So we learned two dances. We learned the plains dance, or the Western powwow style of dancing, which today seems to give a lot of people an identity. It's fun to dance. But he also taught us the Cherokee dances. And so we would go, and ever since I've been 9 years old, whenever there was a Cherokee dance or some kind of celebration, I always went. And so I got exposed to a lot of this. I started playing stickball when I was probably the same age, with the boys. And as I grew up, then I played with my community, Big Cove. I played with my uncles. And it was always good to be out there, to get bloody with them, to play the game. I grew up in the mountains here, and wherever I went, I looked and I knew it to be Cherokee land. What made it feel good for me was that anywhere out there I could walk, and I would be on Cherokee land, on Indian land. And we could walk from one section to another section, and I would not be trespassing. I used to run the trails. As I'd run the trails, I would think, how long and who ran here? Who walked here? Who fished here? I would go to Mingo Falls. I'd go there and pray. I'd love to go there in the wintertime because nobody would come up there. And the snow would be deep, and the ice would be all over the water, all over the falls. And I would go in there and pray. I didn't really understand why. I only knew that that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I wanted to go. Every day I would go swimming in the river, and I would go fishing with my uncles pretty much all year round. So what I'm trying to say here is that everything about me that I knew was Cherokee. And I didn't pay much attention to the language. I did not pay much attention to my tongue. It's been a few years back now, probably about 20 years. I did go to the Cherokee hospital, and there was an older Cherokee gentleman. He spoke to me in Cherokee. And I told him, I said, I don't understand. I can't speak. I don't understand. And this man looked at me. He went, bah, white man. And that stung a little bit, but not in the way that he would think. And I was like, we hear these words from all the Indian nations and all the Indian people about the elders, and that they deserve respect, and we're supposed to be giving them respect. It would be hard for me to give that man respect because I always had the understanding, which was given to me by my father, that as you get older, you should become wiser. A wise one would not have said that to me. So it made me think, though. It did make me think. And I thought about the language then, and off and on, and I would ask questions. And nobody spoke. I didn't know anybody that spoke. I had grandmothers. My grandfathers were gone. And I'd ask the grandmas. They didn't speak. And you'd hear some of the old ladies, the ones that wore the bandanas on their head. Now, they might be speakers. But, of course, they'd only give you one or two words. And so when those words came, it went into your, and you heard it for a moment, then it was gone, it disappeared. So as I looked at it, I did not worry about the language. I did not know. I was really ignorant about the language because I did not use it. I just did not talk about it. I didn't realize that there were kids that I went to school with. That some of them could speak, but they didn't speak at school. They did not let it known that they spoke the language. So that was quite interesting. But as time went on, like I said, everything that I knew about myself was that I was Cherokee. My daughter's mother is Navajo. I went out there and lived for a little while. It was a strange world to go into another world where there's no grass, there's no water, a lot of dirt, a lot of sheep and goat. And I had not been used to eating mutton every day, 3 times a day. My jaws were sore for 2 weeks. And then my jaws adjusted. They got stronger. So I wasn't used to that. I was used to eating, from the garden. Of course, they enjoyed corn. But the biggest thing was that they spoke. They used their language. The whole family did. And one of Sparrow's mother or one of her sisters would interpret for me. They could speak English, but the Shema, the grandma, she did not speak English. She spoke only Navajo. I was allowed in all the ceremonies because I was an Indian, and I lived there. And they were very generous with their knowledge, and I was amazed at some of the things that I seen in the doctrine and the healing. And I was invited to all of them. I was invited to learn the songs, which was really wonderful. But then I come back home here. I knew that if I stayed, I like the culture. I like the traditionalism. I like them being, in my way of saying, Indian. And it was pretty cool. But I knew that if I didn't come home, if I didn't come back to the east, back to these mountains, that I would not leave. Like I said, I did enjoy that Indianism. So I came home and lived my normal life. I was dancing. I've always been involved in the native culture. When the tribe got together and said that they wanted presentations by the tribe that be totally Cherokee, I was asked to be one of the warriors. I said yes, that'd be cool. I knew the dances, except for the one. They brought the warrior dance back, and so I started dancing. And then, as we were together, the group came together. I thought, the talk was we should learn more about the language. Bo Taylor was doing a class on it, an immersion class, 10-day class, and we said, yeah, we'll take it and see how it will benefit us. Well, I took the class, and I will have to tell you, it's like putting a shoe on the wrong foot. I did not like it. It was not fun for me. I didn't enjoy it. I just say it, I hated it. And so I came out of that class, though, and just was really frustrated. And then I got into a project with Colonial Williamsburg. They were doing a documentary. And I was, from that time period, I was supposed to be a speaker. So I had to learn these dialogues. And the dialogue I could memorize until I got to the 7th dialogue. And then, like dominoes, they started crashing. So I had to use the dummy cards. And so I used those. And that made me think, though. I kept thinking about it. I talked to another man, Wiggins Black Fox. I worked with him. And he told me, he said they were going to be having a class about translation. If I could get with a speaker and work with him, it would help me. So I went to this, and I waited, and no speakers showed up. And the project sort of got derailed. But I had no place to go. And I went back to Wiggins, and I was looking at the syllabary. He said, I told him, I said, Wiggins, everything that I've seen is really, really hard. I said, there must be a simpler and easier way. And that's the words I used. I told him, I said, the language has been here forever, as far as we know. I don't know how long that is, but it's forever. I said, thousands of years, how many people, millions of people. I said, but there has to be something that it's not taught. It is not taught, so it can't be that hard. There's got to be something else. Wiggins kind of laughed at me, and he said, well, go ahead. He said, it's been here. He said, people have been trying for a long time to break it apart, to know it, to find a way. He said, go ahead and do it. And he was kind of laughing. I laughed too. I knew that was impossible. So I left it alone for a year, and I just left it alone. And in our office, there was a syllabary chart, and I pulled that chart back down and started looking at it. And I will tell you this, people wonder how I got where this understanding. So I pulled that syllabary chart down and started looking at it. And I seen something very peculiar to me. It didn't match up. I seen that symbols represented the vowels, but there was no symbols for the consonants. There were symbols for consonant and vowel, a syllable. And I thought, well, Now, if you had a symbol for that consonant and combined it with the vowel symbol, you would not have to learn 85 symbols. You would, I said, in my way of thinking, syllabary is not the language. It's just a symbol. The language has been for thousands of years. The writing system's only been here, what, not quite 200? And so I said, now, okay. So I started playing around, and I found another way to write it. And it's from this other way to write it that Barbara Duncan. I went to Barbara Duncan. I went to Barbara Duncan because of this. Barbara has a PhD in some sort of discipline. Folklore, right, Barbara? But she had a PhD, and she had talked, and she had said something about English and the language, and so I knew she was a writer. All the words had to be correct. Sentence structure had to be correct. So I thought, let me show this to Barbara, see if Barbara can see what I see. So I took it to Barbara. And Barbara said, yes, I understand what you've got here. And I thought, wow, this would be cool. We can write with 26 syllables instead of 85. Who wouldn't like that? Well, guess what? Nobody wants it. Nobody don't like it, which is okay. You know, the symbols are not the language, but it's okay. I just thought I had found a simpler way and easier way. But if you really look at it, and if any one of you here have ever noticed that for most people, in order for them to be able to read what they're seeing in Cherokee, they have English script there in the phonetic. That's what people read. So I thought, well, okay, they're already doing it, and they're already using English. It was not a problem. But because I looked at this, Barbara and I decided to just play. So what we would do is we'd write these words down. And as we were writing these words down, what we began to notice was there was a definite pattern. And once we realized that there was a pattern, it was much easier to see with the English phonetic. And so that's where we got one of the secrets. And so everybody says you cannot tear the syllables apart. That was okay, but we did. We tore the syllables apart. And because we were able to do this, then we could see the patterns, where they fit, how they fit. And then I had something to base my learning on. I had something to build on. I had a base to build from. I had learned already that I could not stick everything in my mind and have the memory capacity to learn the whole language. I just could not. There were maybe 50 words, 60 words, if I'm lucky. And I wasn't where I could have constant usage. But I didn't understand. I would ask the question, why is this word this way, or how come? There was no answer. But by looking at the words themselves, then the words gave us everything. And that's the other part of it. When we look at it, and Barbara would ask about a question, sometimes we would talk and say, well, what about this word? There doesn't seem to be a form for it. And I always say, we have to follow the pattern. The pattern is what will give it to us. We actually took the English and just threw it away. We just threw English away. We were studying Cherokee. And so by studying Cherokee, we had to go by the sounds of what Cherokee was. And now, that's a little complicated in itself because in my experience, sometimes the speakers cannot tell you exactly which vowel comes after the consonant because they're used to saying the whole one word. And if you say it in real quickly, or if you're used to just talking with your friends, you might get a little lazy and not say the whole thing. So we seen that, but it was okay again. We just have to keep following, and it's like, since it doesn't matter to a speaker anyway, what vowel it is, as long as they know the word. Also, they have the context of the sentence before and the sentence after, or the word before and the word after. So they can, that's how I used to read comic books when I was a little kid. I might be able to read a sentence, and if I didn't know the word, I'd look at the sentence before and the sentence after, and I'd guess what that word meant. And so I understood that thought. But again, we continued on, and we started to see this method, and Barbara has worked very, very hard. Her sister has worked very, very hard. I would not be standing here if it were not for those two ladies. I would have continued on. People have asked why I was interested in this. I was interested in one reason. I wanted to know. I wanted to understand. When I heard Cherokee words, and people would say this is what it means, it was like I was walking. If this whole room was just dark, you set me free and scattered out the chairs, I'd kill myself, because there was nothing to base anything on. I didn't know anything. And then that comes back to another further point, one of the maybe the biggest points. None of you here, like my granddaughter here, my daughter would not send her to school. She would not send her to the first grade to a teacher who had never been to school. Would any of you? Would you send your child to a teacher who had never been to school, who never studied your language, English, who couldn't tell you what a vowel, a consonant, a verb? We wouldn't do that, right? Well, Cherokee's never been taught like that. So that's what I realized also. I began to see a lot of things, and I thought, wow, check this out. I understood how we learned from our parents. If you see your little one crawling, you say they're crawling. When they get up, you say they're walking. When they begin to speak, you'll say this, say that. They will say words, and you will correct them. This is how you say this. This is what you say. Barbara Duncan's little boy, he talks like he's gone to college already. I mean, Barbara and her daughter speak to him, and he speaks the sentences perfectly and clearly and correctly. That little boy can speak better than I can, and I don't have that. I went to school. I understand. I know noun, adverb, verb. I know. I hate that. That tree, that grammar tree, or whatever that is. I hate that tree. I don't like it. Sentence structure tree. I hate it. That's not fun. And then, as I go along, and because of this, it's made me become a student, I guess, because I've had to look at what everybody says and why. And come to find out, that's just a way to explain it. And I was telling Barbara the other day, it's interesting. Of all these nations of people here who are walking this earth, and especially here in the Americas, most of all the native people have a creation story. And it may have become something from a fish in the sea. It may have been a woman and an eagle on top of Bear Butte. That's where their nation come from. There's all kinds of stories with the explanation of why we are here. Now, and for most people, when they hear these stories, they will say, like the fable or the folklore, or it's just a story. It's not scientific, it could not happen, that's not what happened. But it is an explanation. Well, from what I've seen and I've found out, it's that I have followed and tried to understand the explanations of Cherokee from the modern day thought of the scholars. And because they're based in their language upon the definitions of the English and not the Cherokee words, then what has happened there is that they have made up a good story, like our creation stories. And because we went directly to the words, everything that we follow comes from the Cherokee word. We follow nothing else. The Cherokee word is it. And if you start with the I at the front of every word and you line them up, you start with a D, or start at the other end with a D at the end, or a da, or a U, and follow those. And what will happen, you will begin to see the pattern. And that's what we did. And it's like, yes, we understand what the English definition is, but it's like a word, it's one that I use all the time, and it's real easy. If they say, and I was told, I say it, galegi, and Galegi is pretty simple, just black snake. But if you say Galegi, as it's being recorded and what people seem to understand, and I'm using this as an example because other words are this has happened to many other words also. Galegi means the climber. Doesn't mean the black snake. In that word, there's no black and there's no snake. Now, I pronounce this word, I say Galegi, but Wiggins Black Fox told me, you can't pronounce it that way. He said, I do not know what that is. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I only know what Galegi means. That E, that's what he recognized. If I said it a short E, he said, I don't know what that is. And I thought, wow, okay. And so there are many words like that there's an English understanding that truly is not a Cherokee understanding. I would even say, for the most part, 95, maybe 99%. But they wanted a definition. They have a definition. And it works pretty close. And Wiggins will say many times, he will say, he said, almost, but not quite. He said, similar, looks like it. He said, but it just doesn't fit. And so, again, this is what has been passed on. This is what has been accepted. People do not understand how much time we have spent. And one of the other things that we did was we looked at all the earliest works, all the early documentation. Worcester, okay, he's a big one. As I said, when I began this, I picked up 2 pieces of paper. One of them was a syllabary, and I thought it's strange that this syllabary, if you look at it, you'll find every letter of the alphabet on that chart, except for the X. But you will that's what you'll find. There'll be some letters, a 6 and a 4, it's on there. And again, there's just things that I found out and I look at, and by looking at the earliest words, I also, about 5 years ago, found a copy, and a copy was brought to me of David Brown in Buttrick, who was an early missionary. And what was amazing right there was this man had it's a Cherokee speller, published in 1918. Now that date, 1918, that's 2 to 3 years before Sequoia syllabary came out. This was complete in English phonetic. I mean, it already existed. I don't know what that says, but I do know there's a date on it, published in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he has his words and he has conjugations. So when I look at that was one of the papers. I got that paper from Pennsylvania. Somebody found it and they said, I got something for you. I'm going to send it to you. I said, please. But again, what it came down to was us simply looking at the words. We wanted a way to understand. If my little ones choose to learn, I want them to have a way. And I know that we have hope, I guess. We have backup. I use that word backup because most of our speakers here are of past middle age. I could say that, I've heard these numbers in Oklahoma that there's 10,000 speakers out of 250,000 people. Well, that would seem to say that our language is pretty secure. It would be in the Oklahoma dialect, but it would still be the Cherokee language. So you could say it's pretty secure. But because of what we're looking at and finding out how to understand the words, how they can be conjugated, how we can make them up, and because this lady over here, Barbara's sister, Sue, because of her hard work, you can see the words and make the words. And that is unbelievable. Now, I spent a lot of time when I was trying to figure this out. There were times I thought, this is just so hard. But when I was a little boy, my dad was watching me one day, and I was trying to tie my shoe, and I become frustrated, and I got mad, and my dad was explaining, try again, and I said, I can't. He said, no, son. He said, never say you can't. Never say you can't. He didn't like that word. Well, I could not say can't. And I said, I can't. He said, no, you can. He said, but have patience. So because I've had patience and would not quit, I believe that there was a way. Barbara Duncan has really been unbelievable. Nobody can know how hard she has worked. Nobody can know how hard her sister has worked for us to make this possible. And the reason it exists today is that if it can help the people, if people, to help them and to understand the way it's been set up, and that's mostly because of Barbara's good scholarship. All of us are used to learning in a certain way because of the schooling we received. You will see pieces, and you will know when to put the pieces in. You will know when to take the pieces out. You will know what drops out. You know how to go to past, present, future, and all. You can speak. You can speak like you went through the 6th grade. You can learn like you went through the 6th grade, or 2nd grade, or high school, or college. If you want to, there are so many Cherokee words that can be made. Then you can speak like Shakespeare if you wish to. You can speak like the dictionary. Now, I don't know who you're going to speak to, because there's a lot of guys that I speak to, and they use too many words. They're a little too big for me. But if you want to, it will exist. It will be here now. And this has been so that, you know, we hope people will want to use it if they'd like, but it is a way. I believed and could not let go of that there had to be a way to understand, not just mimic like a parrot or a crow, that you had to be able to understand it and know what you were saying. This is why this has been developed. So I want to say thank you for being here and listening to me. And I want to say thank you to Sue and to Barbara Burke, because I would not be here right now without all their hard work. I wouldn't have quit, though, but because they're here, because we're all here now, it's because it's hard work. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, my babies.